So I'm excited to be here today with a special guest, Andrée-Claude Bérubé, one of my favorite people out of Montreal. And although initially we met out of Toronto, Andrée-Claude is the general counsel at SNC-Lavalin. And she's lived both in Toronto and Montreal. But when I ask her what her favorite city is, she says, "I love Toronto, but Montreal is more fun. The joie de vivre is more fun." And like, Claude, sorry, I'm speaking for you, but I will ask a little bit about this afterwards. So, Andrée Claude, welcome and thank you for joining us here today. I know there will be many people in our audience looking forward to listening to you and some of the tips that you have and sort of the course of your career, which is always for aspiring, whether aspiring lawyers, more junior lawyers, etc. They always want to know, what is my path to be in a role like that, which is very prestigious, but also a role that many lawyers aspire to. And I will start with just some very simple questions. So tell us a little bit about Andrée-Claude. Who is Andrée-Claude as a person, and sort of the where you grew up, and a little bit of sort of the course and that brought us to here today.
For sure, and thank you very much, Gary, for having me. It's always fun to do these events with you. So really happy to be here with you. So a little bit about me. I'm from Quebec. I was actually born and raised in Amos, Abitibi-Témiscamingue, so northern part of the Quebec province. I grew up there, and when I was 17 years old, I decided I wanted to do my cégep in Quebec City. So spent 2 years in Quebec City, and then went to McGill Law School. And so, my parents were both teachers, no lawyers in the family. But when I was 14 years old, I somehow made up my mind that that's what I wanted to do. And I'm trying to remember why. And I think, there was some backstory where I pleaded something for my classmates when I was in grade 8 or something with our principal, and he said, "You would make a good lawyer." And I sort of stuck with that and said, well, I think I would. And that's sort of where I think that's the story. At least that's what I remember. And so I studied, I did my civil law and common law degree at McGill, called the National Program. When I started, I sort of wanted to make sure that I had all the doors open if I wanted to practice law outside of Quebec, which proved to be a good decision in hindsight. So that takes me there. Do you want me to talk about all the professional journey as well at this point?
No, I think that's a great way to know. And I think sometimes people, when we talk in a professional context, sometimes it's hard to know sort of, hey, like, what was our upbringing like, right? Like, and it's nice to know that people from different parts of the country have sort of become leaders in our respective industries. So we've had people on the podcast from all the way from BC to the East Coast, and it really is inspiring. So just on that to ask a little further from a professional perspective, and Claude as well, a bit of the professional path, since we're on the topic. Following law school, what did that look like?
Yeah, so when I was in at McGill, I actually did what we call curso stage, so sort of like the internship. So I did get an internship at McArthur. So I started as a summer student, as well as I started working with them, and I knew I had my articling. And when I finished my bar school here in Quebec, I thought, well, maybe I want to pause a little bit and do something different for a little while before I do my articling, after 5 years of law. And I was thinking maybe doing something in commerce to get some other experience, in my back pocket. And in a fair about international studies, I think I came upon this organization that promoted grants from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for recent graduates. And they were sort of, commerce first. So I thought, well, that's really good, based, so maybe I'll apply for that. I ended up getting the grant, and they had a couple of positions. And one of them was actually with a law firm in Mexico City. And at first I was like, no, I don't want to do law. And then they sort of, convinced me that because I had a legal background, I did have a good knowledge of Spanish at the time, just taking it through school, that was, a really good opportunity for me. And I thought, okay, well, it is true that it still would be very different than what I know. So why not try it? So I went I did 6 months there, and that was my first international experience. And then I came back and did finished my articling in Montreal with McCarthy. And then growing up, it's funny because there is a link with why I spoke where I'm from, but I grew up, and it's a very, nature is very present in northern Quebec, and there's a lot of minings and pulp and paper and forestry. And so where I wanted to start was to do environmental law. So I chose McCarthy because they had a really strong practice of environmental law. And that's where I started. So I said, that's what I want to do. I made it clear. I applied here. I chose you guys because you have a practice of environmental law, and that's what I want to do. And so that's where I started my practice. And, slowly doing some files. It was the time where there was a lot of clean energy projects. So wind farms, remember, there was a lot of RFPs from Andrée-Quebec. And so McCarthy was very active in there, and I had the chance to work on that. I also did some, at the time, Hydro-Québec had some international divisions. So I was involved in, hydroelectric projects in other jurisdictions, doing due diligence. And then slowly I started to do as well, working a lot with the industry, including with the mining industry. And I really, really enjoyed sort of learning about, the business, but the industrial side as well, and how things happen. And I worked a lot with a lot of engineers actually at the time. So everything sort of comes around. And, I actually spent 10 years with McCarthy, really learned a lot. It was a really good, very good training, very strong people, awesome clients. So I learned a lot. And that led me to my next sort of next position where, in about 10 years after I started practicing law as a lawyer with McCarthy, I was approached by a mining company, a Canadian mining company that had offices in Toronto, for a position of essentially general counsel of a joint venture that they were part of, and it was a project in Madagascar, in Africa, with two Asian partner and another partner that was actually SNC-Lavalin at the time. So interesting again.
It is really all about coming full circle at one point, right?
Exactly. Everything is, nothing happens for no reason, I always say. So I made the decision that time. It was a difficult decision because I wasn't looking to change, but I thought, wow, that's very interesting. And the timing was good because I had two young children, and I had a really great husband that said, I'm gonna support you, and I'm willing, and let's go. Very scary, but at the same time, we're like, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? We're not going to like it, then we're just going to come back, right? I mean, but we'll have the experience at least, and that's something that I think it's very important. And I tell people, if you don't do it, you won't have the experience. So what if it doesn't turn out as you thought it would? But at least you've done it, and you can say I've tried. So we had never set foot in Africa in my life, and I signed the offer before I even went to see. I'm like, I'm doing it. So I was a little bit bold, but. So we left we packed our bags and left the whole family, and we went there and signed up for 3 years. Ended up staying 5, and that was really, in terms of, if you talk about something that changed the path of your career, I can definitely say that changed the path of my career for sure. And the experience that I got there, the people I met, it was really, very, very challenging. Very, very challenging, but I learned so much, and in terms of human experience, it was fantastic. So that was really sort of, I never regretted it. I missed my colleagues, but never ever regretted sort of leaving private practice and doing that switch in house, because I learned so much, and I really actually really found out I really like working in house, which I didn't really think I would when I was at McCarthy. I always thought, I don't know if I would like work. It looks a little boring. It was nothing but boring. I can tell you, and still is. So definitely, right decision in retrospect.
Well,
Should I keep going? Do you want me to just?
no. I'd love for you to keep going. The only comment I had just it really is that you know, you're right. The in-house can sometimes be perceived as boring, but when you work at the size organizations you've worked for, there's so many. It's so multifaceted. It's like running a firm, and especially where you are now. But I won't say much more just yet. So I'll let you continue, and then I'll give you some of my
For
thoughts.
sure. Okay. So as I said, I signed up for 3 years, and then I sort of extended, and then at the end of the 5 years, I said, okay, you guys, I need to. It's very. I mean, it is quite far away. We're far away from our family and our parents, and so we decided, okay, it's time to get closer. Wasn't quite ready to come back to Canada yet. I thought, I sort of like the international expat life. So the company I worked for was really great in that they said, well, you know what, we think we can have a role for you and for our operations in Cuba. So I thought, that sounds interesting. I think, I can do Cuba
Yes.
for a few years. And the role there was sort of looking after legal activities related to Cuba. So they had some that were that were actually in Canada as well. So, but, it was a joint venture. So sort of similar organization in the sense that it was, with partners. And, and there was also a sort of an in-country representative role attached to that, which I thought was very interesting because I did do sort of government relations type work in Madagascar, being in legal, working with ministries, etc. So I thought that's a good sort of good continuation of that. So I took the role. I thought it was good, another good challenge. And with me speak Spanish, having worked in Mexico, I had worked in Spanish, legal Spanish before. So it took me a little while to get back to that. But really enjoyed that experience. Cuba was a fascinating place. It was a time politically that was also very interesting when, they started opening up and Obama came, and we had also, many delegations coming in. See, unfortunately, that didn't last. So a very challenging place, obviously, with the embargo to do business as a foreign company. And after 3 years, with now teenage kids, we made the decision that, probably was time for us to come back as a family to Canada. And that's when I moved to Toronto. So that's where when I was at with Sherritt International at their corporate office in Toronto, that we met Gary. And there I took more of a corporate position as associate general counsel and assistant corporate secretary. So working at the mother company and looking after our public disclosures and sort of
For sure.
again a sort of brother role, but at the corporate office. So and then was not looking to move again. I had actually made a promise to my family that was it. That we were done moving for a little while, and sure enough, uh, 2 years in, SNC came knocking at the door and said, "Hey, we have this. We're looking for someone to come and support our general counsel. It's so it's sort of a corporate secretary, but also I was associate general counsel." And I thought, well, that's I really thought hard, and I said, well, I can't. It's too interesting for me to pass on, and SNC being a very well-known Quebec company, it was sort of really great opportunity for me to essentially come back home, because that's where we had started as a family. So I convinced everyone, and we moved back to Quebec, and I came here again with I was very clear that what I wanted to do with my career is that at some point in my life I wanted to be a general counsel. So I thought it was a great place, what better place to learn, to be a general counsel. It's such a big entity with a wide variety of projects, very interesting. So it was for me, it was sort of a learning experience. And I said, if ever there's an opportunity there, great. If not, I'm hoping that, maybe in the medium term, I can get, a general counsel position. And then things unfold a little bit quicker than I expected. But, in 2020, two, our general counsel decided to take another position, and so the position became open and was offered to me, and then that's where I ended up in how I ended up in this position. So very, again, in hindsight, very good decision that paid off. So
No, and I think it's a excellent story, and I think it really provides some good perspective to like, especially like I mentioned earlier, if you're a lawyer thinking career path, like that's really provides some perspective. So a couple of tangential questions for you, Andrée-Claude, and only because I interviewed an executive for the podcast, and he said many of the opportunities that he ended up having was because he was open to relocating and actually opened some doors that had he not been open to that may have been a bit more limited. Did you find the same thing, that some of the opportunities that you had you not been open to relocation may have been a bit more limited?
well, for sure, obviously the ones that I did, the Madagascar position would not have been possible. It was really they needed someone on site for that one. I was offered the possibility of leaving my family and do a flying fly out, which was for me was just a non-starter. I said we're all going, or none of us, we're not going. So for me, having my family with me was always very important, and making sure that they had a good place to live, we had good schools. That was important. And I understand it's not, as I said earlier, Gary, I was fortunate to have a partner that was very supportive,
For sure.
and that was ready to make a career concession for my career to take me where I am now. But it's not always the case, and sometimes there are some parents that aging parents that you have to take care of. So I fully appreciate. I mean, relocation is one way of having opportunities, but I think that you have to be open to opportunities and to stretch yourself out of your zone of comfort. I mean, now it's completely out of my zone of comfort. I can tell you, I had never set foot in Africa. I had no clue what I was getting to, quite frankly, which probably was better, but just, be open to say yes and try new things and fail, right? I mean, I didn't
For
know,
sure.
right? I knew that there was a possibility that I would get there. And some of my colleagues actually didn't have really good experience because their spouse, for example, was not happy, and then that it doesn't work, right? I mean, so everybody has to sort of be comfortable, but try, right? And I that's what I keep telling to my team, and I've put people in my team in sort of positions where they went like, are you really sure? I'm like, yeah, I think you can do it. Like, just try it. I think you'd be good in that. Then they do it, and they're fantastic, and they're so surprised that they could do that. And I'm like, well, you have to put yourself out there and try different things. And we have moved people here. So we try to offer those international opportunity. We're fortunate that we're a big enough company that we can actually move people, but it doesn't have to be that. You can work on a project that's sort of
For sure.
outside of yours. So I would say being open to things and say yes more than you say no, definitely, right? Because someone that always says no, or never wants to try something new, and they might be very good in their field, but the risk is that there might be one opportunity that you would really want to say yes to, but it might not be offered to you when it comes, if you keep saying no, or if you're always sort of close to that. So I always encourage. I'm so happy when people put their hands up on some things, even if it's not the right opportunity for them, because what it gives me is an opportunity to see that they are open to other opportunities, and
For sure.
then when the right opportunity comes, I can go to them and say, hey, the other one wasn't for you, but this one maybe, right? So I
Absolutely.
always applaud when people put their hands up for any opportunity. And you're not always going to get it the first time, but at least you make yourself out there. You put yourself out there, and you say me. And definitely, I think the flexibility is important for employers, right? That they know that you'll stretch yourself, you do things that are not in your zone of comfort because you just want to learn and try different things.
Well, and I can attest to that, having seen it firsthand. You really do push your team to, and give them that sense of comfort around comfort with failure and to speak up that, hey, I'm willing to give it a shot. I'm willing to try this. And I think that's important. And it's incumbent upon us as leaders to say, create that safe environment so that people say, because we all struggle with that imposter syndrome at one stage in our career or another. The more responsibility we get, we're like, are we truly ready for this? And ultimately, it's not until you're challenged that you can actually assess what people are made of, until like there's the next opportunity arises.
Yeah, and it's normal to be scared. I mean, if you get it's absolutely normal that you go like, oh wow, I'm very scared. Good, you should, because it's something, but then it sort of makes you more resilient and put yourself, really challenge yourself. And I think it's really good. So.
One last question, just around the travel. Obviously, having done this with family, how did the family handle it? Was it hard on them? Did they manage? Sort of, what tips would you have for sort of executives moving with their families?
Yeah,
or
yeah.
what considerations?
Yeah, no, I mean they're I would say that kids adapt faster than adults. I mean, we were very fortunate in our move that quickly, we met really great people that sort of became our family, abroad and friends. But, the first thing, every time I move, I said, the first thing I want to see is the school. Second thing I want to see is the house. The rest I'll figure out. But that was sort of my key priorities, and make sure that my family was, we had a good school identified. We had a house, safe place to live, that, my family would be fine in. And then the work stuff, I said, oh, that one I know I'll figure it out. And it's important to keep an eye on what's happening. But they were, I mean, the kids, they're, I am taking my daughter on Friday to university in the UK because she decided that she wanted to study abroad. So I can't really, she sort of grew up with that. And for her, it's sort of, I mean, she has put herself out there, and I'm very proud, because she is scared, which is normal, but she's also doing it. So again, taking the opportunity and putting yourself out of your zone of comfort. But I see that she's sort of, it's part of her now, right? She's sort of, she wants to experience different places and learn, be in different countries. So we'll see about the little one, but definitely, I mean, and again, my husband was very supportive, and that's where I saw it fail. I would say most of the time is that you need to make sure that, if you're going as a family, that everybody's good, find their, have things to do, find their own places in that, because you're working, right? So your life is more or less normal, right? But you have to, if you have a partner, you have to make sure that they can get that sort of sense of normality as well, in terms of getting their bearings. But definitely.
No, and that's a very good point, because you're doing your work just from another place, and your work probably doesn't look extremely different. But for the spouse and the children, like there's a bit of their own adjustment. So keeping an eye on sort of their evolution as well is important. Makes perfect sense.
Yeah. And making good friends that are there to support you. As I said, it becomes your family when you're so far away. That the friends that we made while we were away became very quickly very close friends.
Well, and it's what a great way for the family, but also the children, to get exposed to that. Because to your point, your daughter may have not been as keen to go and do that in the UK by herself, had it not been for some of the experiences she had with you. And that's a great way to help them spread their wings and give them the confidence that they can.
For sure, absolutely.
So I got distracted a little bit with all these questions around the various places in your career. I want to go back a little bit to your upbringing. Growing up, who was probably the biggest influence on you and who you are today?
That's a very good question. And I'm not like, as I said, I had no one that was a lawyer in my family, and I was not sort of like admiring any sort of, either TV character or anything like that. So that's not it. I mean, I have to say my parents, I think, and the upbringing, and both my parents were teachers. So obviously education has always been important. They would, and so that's always something, for me, being going to school, et cetera, was always something that, was important to me. and not that they pushed me super hard. They were just very supportive, and they've supported me, all the way, through university. And that made a difference in the sense that I really felt that, whatever I wanted to do, they would support me. So I think that's what I'm trying to replicate with, with my kids and my daughter now. So I think,
No, and I think that's very important because appreciating education, and as you said, one of the first things you look at is where are we going to live? What's the school the kids are going to? Because appreciating education and sort of the opportunities it provides. Now, I think I know the answer based on the previous questions, but one of the things I like to ask as well is, what did you want to be growing up? Which we knew pretty early on you wanted to be a lawyer. Was there any point where you thought something else was a consideration other than being a lawyer?
I mean, there was various things that sort of probably interested me, but nothing to the point where I said, "Oh, that's what I want to do as a career." Like
Fair enough.
I was very, you know, very sort of minded that this is what I wanted to do. And honestly, I think when I was probably in my second year of law school, I decided I wanted to do environmental law. At least as a start, which is what I did. And it's funny because I met a former colleague of mine several years later at our, I don't know, 20th, 30th, I can't remember, maybe 20th law school reunion. And he said, "So what did you ended up doing?" And I said, "Well, I went to McCarty to practice environmental." He's like, "Wow, so you said you were going to do, and that's what you ended up doing." I'm like, "Yeah."
But you have to love that part of it. It's because how many people pivot during their career and often even change professions entirely.
Which is
Present company,
fine.
including.
I mean, changing is fine too. I don't know. For me, it was sort of like that's sort of I have
You
my
knew what you wanted. Now, when you're a busy executive, and sort of whether you were a lawyer in private practice, whether in-house, sometimes it's hard to find time, especially between family work, for hobbies. But what are your favorite hobbies, for just at a sort of
Do you
personal
want to
level?
have a
What do you enjoy
guess?
doing? You're really good at developing relationships. So in some good fine dining with good company and some good wine and some travel
I do. Yeah, I do
is
all
what I
enjoy
would
all
guess.
of that. Absolutely. I think travel would probably be on the top of it. I mean, I
Okay.
had this. We all have our bucket list. Mine was traveling to 50 countries by the time I'd be 50. I'm actually going to reach it earlier. When we're going to go to the UK, we're actually going to go to Wales, and that's going to be my 50th country. So, and I'm not 50, so
Oh, that's nice.
so I've ticked that one. But definitely just traveling, meeting, under seeing different cultures, just seeing
For sure.
the landscape and all the wonderful things that our world has in it. I just think, I will keep traveling for as long as I can, honestly. That's just something that I really appreciate. And I like to do it with my family. I'm lucky that my family likes it too. So my daughter said, as long as you keep paying, I'll keep going. So I'll see how that. So hopefully
Well,
that's true.
that's one way to keep incentivizing them as they grow older. It's like if mom is paying, okay, we'll go. No, and I figured travel was certainly part of it, but the reason why I mentioned some of the social, the dining, etc., was more so around the because that one is easier to do more on a regular basis, sort of on a
For
weekly
sure.
basis, versus the travel provides some limitations. Although I think whether for business or personal, you've been fortunate enough to do a fair bit of it, which is always a bonus.
Yeah. No, I definitely always
So
enjoy, taking time with friends and chatting or having people. You know what? I like to have people over as well. So I don't always have the time to do it, but I like to throw sort of like parties with 30 people in the house. So, I try to do it once in a while because I actually really like it. So,
I had a feeling you enjoyed hosting, so that does not surprise
yeah,
me.
I do.
I will pivot a little bit more to some of the experiences you've had, and more specifically, whether it's Madagascar, whether you're working in Cuba, whether it is challenges that you're experiencing currently. sort of your roles by definition involve delicate situations, etc. What are some challenges that you may have encountered that you were like, at the time seemed overwhelming or particularly difficult, and sort of how did you overcome them? Because if you think of sort of the audience, they may often be in that situation where it's like, hey, I'm in a country where there's geopolitical issues or whatever it may be, and how do I navigate them as counsel, especially when I have employees that are dealing with these situations. I could think of a myriad of situations.
So can I. And there's, I mean, there's legal issues. I think the one that comes to mind, and I'll come back maybe to a little bit more sort of legal issues. But one thing I have experienced is in that position again in Madagascar. I mean, those kind of positions, there's a lot of turnaround, and the expectations of people normally stay 2 to 3 years because it's so intense and it's hard being away, from family. So there's a lot of turnaround, and actually, I had 5 presidents in 5 years, and by year 3, I think I was the sort of longest standing member of the executive committee, having been there only for 2-3 years. So that's tough because there is also sometimes there is a desire, I find, from you executive to sort of do different rather than build on. Right. And my position is, let's try to not throw everything that the other person did in the garbage, because it can't, they're all smart people. It cannot be all bad, and rather,
Of course.
try to build on, better, improve. That's all great. And sometimes there's things you need to change, but let's not sort of try to change everything, because I saw us going from, one way to another, 180 degrees, and then the next person brings it back. So I'm like, and change, so much changes is difficult to assimilate for people, and just it does burn out people, and just get, so that was difficult, in trying to influence people, and let's try to, there was a reason why it was done this way. Maybe you need to spend some time understanding why it was done this way, rather than just say that doesn't seem right, I'm just going to change it, and then improve on it, but build on it. So that for me was I found that was very challenging. I mean, from a legal perspectives, obviously, I mean, it's difficult, and even Madagascar and Cuba were very different, and obviously very different from Canada. I think it's keeping a cold head, right? I mean, just looking at situations, trying to detach the emotion, because a lot of time when there is a crisis, people get emotional, people are stressed or scared, or so I personally have become super calm when there's that's sort of, I think that's one of my strengths, is that if things, everything's flying, I sort of go super calm, and then try to assess, remove myself a little bit from the situation and have a look at it. And it's not always easy, but I think you need to do that. And I see that as our role as the lawyers, and say, okay, everybody just let's take a deep breath. Let's not shoot things, in every direction, but look at it with a cold head. And then, depending on the situation, right? I mean, hold the line. I think we do have that capacity, or that, I don't know if it's a training or the capacity we're learning, but as lawyers, we're really good at connecting the dots as well. So, sort of grabbing pieces of information and go like, okay, this and that, let's, means this, or those are the solutions I see, taking all these information. So I think that's sort of, I see that as strength of most lawyers, that we're able to do that. And for people when there are sort of, those kinds of situation, and bringing sort of the logical, analytical piece to it, rather than the emotional of, oh my God, everything is going south type of situation. But I can definitely say that a lot of time, when I worked in those positions, and even now, I go like, oh, I didn't see that one coming. Like, I mean, you just go like, oh, okay, that's new, right? And this sort of tend to happen also one after the other. Like, you have like a stretch of very quiet time, and then one day is just like everything is sort of popping at the same time, and you go, and normally I laugh, right? Just honestly, that probably maybe not the right reaction, but not that I find it funny, but I'm just like, okay, what am I going to do? I can't cry, so I'd rather laugh and just look at it and say, okay, let's deal with them one at a time, and try to do our best, right? And just apply good judgment, quite frankly. And that's something, someone said that to me once, where I said, well, I don't know this, I don't know that, and said, well, it doesn't really matter, right? I mean, what's important here is good judgment. And I said, you know what, that's absolutely right. That's what's going to get out of this, not knowing the details of every piece of legislation is just. And I think intuitively, lawyers, we do have good judgment, and you just need to sort of, as I said, take a bit of a step back and think about the situation.
And that's so true, Andrée-Claude. Most of the time, and as you see lawyers, even as they advance in their career, what makes them what distinguishes them is not who knows the law better, because learning the actual law isn't the hard part. It's the application, it's sort of connecting the dots and good judgment around it, healthy business risks around decision making. And those are the types of things that you see, when you see the leadership, especially within the legal circles, tends to be, and frankly, it's in business more broadly as well. It's healthy risks, appetite, good judgment, based on good information, and sort of assessing it effectively in a short fashion. So these tend to be, you start seeing some of these parallels around successful people.
Yeah.
So what did you say made you successful, sort of at these various stages, whether in private practice or at this, what were some of the elements that led to this success?
Good question. I mean, I do believe I do have good judgment. I think that's something that I'm very intuitive as well. Like I'm it's a bit scary sometimes when I'm like, it doesn't smell right normal. I mean, I'm really wrong, and I use it to my advantage now. I'm like, you know what? I just I have all the alarms bell going. I don't think we should do that. And I'm very rarely wrong when that happens. So sort of people go like, maybe I should listen. And I try to. I think I have a good business sense as well. I think I hope most lawyers have, but it's sometimes at various degrees, and I do think you have to work on that. I think one of my former boss told me, "Oh, you're street smart." So I try to not make it more complicated than it needs to be. I mean, while doing things lawfully, etc. But make it simple for your people, because you don't need to know that you've done all the analysis and that you know all the law and then you checked everything. They just need to know, can I do it or no? And if there's a but, tell me what the but is, and just get it, let's get to it. And so sort of really bring it down to what's necessary in terms of information, because if you send in a 30-page memo, they're just not going to read it. They want to know, tell me what I can do or not, or what's your recommendation, and I can make my decision. So being very sort of succinct in what how you bring the legal information, that it's useful, and it's just not sort of a no. Like, I don't say no. I say, well, if I think, I always try to find a solution. That would be my thing. It's like, okay, well, maybe we can't do it this way because blah, 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 but this is what we could do. And most of the time, people are like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense, right? They're not sort of, they want to do things in the right way. So I haven't, very rarely in my career encountered a situation where we're like, no, we want to go the wrong way. Like, it just doesn't happen. And if it does, then you have, there's another issue with those people. But so being sort of really sort of business minded, but also succinct, and sort of bring the information in a very, I don't want to say easy way, because people cannot understand this, but just sort of adapt your bring information, right? So that it's useful and it's sort of to the point and it's not too legal. The other thing is just, I think that from I really enjoy knowing people. So I think that I like to take time to build some relationships and make sure that I spend time with my colleagues, understanding their reality, their issues, what's important to them, and so that we can give them a good legal service, but also you've built those relationships, because when you're an executive team, you work, they're not super big team, and it's very important to spend time together.
For sure.
Even if, like in this situation, we're sort of, spread around, we're not all in the same office, but we do make a point of spending time together on a regular basis. And I do think that's very, very important. So take that time to know people that you work with, and then build those relationships.
And I think, if I may add, Andrée-Claude, it is one of your superpowers. I've seen you do this with internal team members, with external partners, where sort of you spend time developing those relationships. You're demanding, with whether external or internally, rightfully so. But when you build those relations, then people understand, okay, this is what it takes to be successful. And as we've sort of heard on this podcast, probably on multiple occasions, good leaders are often demanding, almost borderline unreasonably demanding, but that's how you advance things at a good pace, because it's to achieve things, a little bit of push is always necessary. And you do that really well. So I felt like I had to add that.
No, it's a fair, it's a fair comment. I get it, and then people tell me your bar is very high. I'm like, yeah, my bar is very high, but I will support you, and I try to bring everybody along, but at the same time, we have a job to do, and it has to be done well. So I absolutely, I'm sort of demanding, but supporting as well. So that's sort of trying to keep that balance, and that you're not sort of, putting also people, and you know what, I don't want people to fail either. So that's not, that's because then I'm failing too. So when I say I've put some of my team members in positions where they thought, wow, can I do that? I support them. And it is tough.
Exactly.
And they go through tough time. I'm like, yeah, of course it's tough, but then let's support you and bring you up. And then they when they succeed, it's, it's very rewarding as well. And then it's a good way to retain them as well, because then they're sort of, they've been challenged and they can do things. So it's making sure that you keep that balance though of being, putting the bar high, but then making sure that you support your people so that they can attain that bar as well.
And that's why I said it's one of your superpowers. I think it's truly been one of the parts of your successes, that because we can always be contributing well as individuals, but without a really good team supporting that effort, we could never achieve all that we could achieve. It's impossible.
For sure, absolutely. That's key. It's I wouldn't be here for sure if I didn't have the team that I have.
I always have a lot of questions, and I knew I would have a lot of questions for you. I will ask one more question, and I'll pivot to what we call rapid fire question part of the podcast. And the last question is, for lawyers sort of earlier in their practice, or sort of whether they're in legal practice or in business, I think there's probably some parallels we could draw from. What piece of advice would you have for them to advance sort of well in their career, if they're ambitious, to whether they continue on the private practice side, whether it's in-house, sort of what did you say are good formulas for success?
Yeah, I mean, there's no one formula, I think, but what is useful, I think, is sort of make a sort of a short-term, mid-term, longer-term plan, right? So that you sort of, where you want to be in 1 year, where do you like to be in 3 years, and where do you like to be maybe in 5 years and up, and then just sort of look at that and say, okay, what do I have to do to get there? Make it known, because a lot of times I find that people don't speak up, or they want to do this, but you don't know about it. So it's important to make it known. Be open to things that are outside of that plan, because you never know, right? You never know how things are going to come around, but it's useful to sort of have that, and then be flexible so that it can change and it evolves. But at least it gives you sort of a sense of direction. And it helped me make some decisions in my career where I was offered a few times to do things that would have taken me outside of law. And I really looked into them very closely, and I thought, oh, maybe that's. But then I sort of always had that. Well, what I ultimately want to do, I want to be a general counsel because I really love practicing law. That's really something that I really really enjoy doing, and it sort of made me decide not to do it. Maybe it would have been a great career as well, but it was not sort of. I didn't think it was on the right path for me. And so I turned it down. I rarely said no to things, but this is one thing I said, okay, because of that, I think it would just take me on a very different path, and that's not what I want to do. So to have a bit of clarity, but as I said, just don't, obviously, if you're like, in 1 year, I want to be a GC, that's probably not going to, if you start, that's probably not going to be a workout for most people. Sometimes it could, but keep that in the back of your mind. And then just, again, as I said, try to say yes more than you say no. In terms of opportunities, put yourself out there, but also be patient, right? So put it out there, say that's what I want to do. Raise your hand, and then be patient, and don't necessarily expect that the right opportunity is going to come in 2 months because you've said it. But again, make it known, etc. And then when the right opportunity will come, be confident that people will reach out to you. But and you have to obviously you also have to look for those opportunities as well. But I think I see sometimes where some people, and not many people, but we go like, well, I told you I wanted to be a director. Well, yeah, but you've been here 1 year, so I mean, yes, you have, and we're going to put you on the path, and we're going to do a development plan, and we'll give you opportunity. But there's also need to be some realistic expectations as well, and patience in terms of getting the skills and getting the knowledge, and sort of the diverging from traditional path. I mean, for me, experience is gained through all sorts of things, and so as much as sort of lateral move, which are not necessarily promotions, but are getting skills that are completely different than what you know now, getting skills from external expertise as well. So all that sort of makes who you are, and then when the right opportunity comes and it's really a sort of step up, you have all of that, which will sort of set you apart, right? So it's also sort of trying to get experience from all very different sources, with that sort of help reaching your ultimate goal.
No, those are great nuggets, and I think really certainly that resonate with. I think the saying yes more than you say no. I mean, we're sort of, especially as employees have had sort of the options for employment, etc. Sometimes like, well, why take this challenge when I can just go get a place elsewhere or a position elsewhere? I think challenges should be seen as just that, as an opportunity to grow versus as just, oh, now I have more work to do, right? And I think from a personal growth perspective, those are critical.
For sure.
So I'm going to go to what we call the rapid fire question. So here and this is a little bit of a surprise. It's essentially one word answers, like whatever you sort of comes top of mind. No, you don't have to overthink it. So that can keep it super simple from that perspective. So I will start with the first one. What is your favorite word?
Apple. Nothing to do with the brand.
I love it.
I like the fruit.
What word do you hate?
Corruption.
Excellent. What word do you have a hard time pronouncing, if any?
It's a word in Spanish. Garaje. Garaje.
Which I assume means garage.
It does, but it's just hard, sort of.
No, for sure. Just for the purpose of the audience, when it's instinctively, I need to translate everything. So, what is your favorite word in another language?
Amor.
Can't argue with that. How many languages do you speak?
3.
And what's one word to describe yourself?
Resilient.
I couldn't agree more. So, Andrée-Claude, really appreciate you joining me for the podcast today. It's been a true pleasure, and I know the audience will benefit a lot from everything that they've heard here today. And it will, in short order, we'll make sure it's published.
Thank you so much.
Thank you again.
Thank you.